more about. Mr. Garrison, you gave a different answer, so I don't know if both of you can comment. I was not in the commission chambers when the money was just approved again. I was in the chambers when it was approved last time. Sheriff V. Hill stood up and said, our officers just go when called and stand around. I don't think anybody in the commission chambers was persuaded by that answer. So I ask you again, $750,000 is a lot of money. I get that. What are you going to do with it? And how are you going to deal with that sentence? If you can't answer, Ms. Stewart, I understand. How are you going to deal with that sentence?
Could I clarify something real quick? You said that our Sheriff Hill said they stand around. What does that pertain to?
So when called by Border Patrol or whoever for backup or we need help, that yes, the officers would respond, but they would just stand around. They wouldn't do anything.
Okay.
Thank you.
Again, $700,000 is a lot of money, and that's half of what we used to get. It used to be over $1 million. And that money is spent on the southwest border to acquire resources, and there is a plan on how that money is spent. A lot of it is used for overtime operations when we identify specific problems in our communities, such as gang activity. I mean, there are a lot of issues that are present and can be related back to the border. So that is not a real slim dart you have to just throw. It is a very broad thing. 90% of the things that happen here can relate back to the border. So it's important that you understand we respond to criminal activity. If the federal government called, they're calling to ask for help. That is if one of them is in trouble. There has been a number of times when our Border Patrol agents have been being shot at and are in a car chase. That is when the times that I know of that when we've been called to help. We do not enforce immigration. They understand that. They know that. We support our Border Patrolmen for doing their job, and they leave us alone and let us do ours. Ours is to respond to criminal activity and to fight those issues. So I hope that is more specific. There are a number of reports that are generated for Stone Garden as to exactly what comes up. One was presented the other day to the commission whenever the grant was being asked to be kept. That has a lot of information that's open to the public. So, I mean, those meetings are open to the public and that information is available. So, thank you, ma'am.
The Stone Garden grant, I still maintain, has been a money bag with no real control or oversight for a long time. And that lends itself to the lack of mission, if you will, or the lack of a specific purpose that Dona Ana Sheriff can be focused on. There, to my knowledge, hasn't been one. In August 2015, the Office of the State Auditor released a forensic audit of Stone Garden, and they found that fiscal years 2012 and 2013, about 30% of that budget that year was consumed by upper management who had no oversight. None. They were approving their own overtime. Okay. There's a problem with that, folks. I'm sorry to tell you, when I mentioned that we need an audit, we need an audit. We need to know about these funds. We need to know about them going all the way back to 2008 when they were, I believe, first taken or applied for, to the present. Okay? Here's the other issue with this. There is a difference between federal probable cause and state probable cause. When federal agents approach someone, it does not take a whole lot of probable cause or reason, if you will, to approach them. Okay? It takes very little. State probable cause is a very different animal. It's a much higher standard, okay? I'm concerned for our deputies. If we're out in the desert and we're approaching people, under what probable cause are you approaching them? Can you see from 5 miles away that their pockets are full of meth? Or you get up to them and you hear them speaking Spanish? Well, believe it or not, federal probable cause, that is probable cause to stop them, not for the state. So I have an issue if we have an actual problem where one of our deputies is down there on the line helping or responding or whatever you want to call it out at that border. I have a problem with that. Because to me, there's no accountability, and quite frankly, in the years I've looked at this, there's never been much of any accountability. So when you have that kind of thing and those high money stakes, I think you're putting the county and the department at risk, quite frankly. And I am saddened that over the course of years, especially the meeting the woman referred to a couple of months ago, nobody asked any questions. The news media did a IPRA request and found out there were 500 referrals to Customs and Border Protection from DASO. What's a referral? I don't know what a referral is. Nobody asked. I think those are questions that need to be asked. And by the way, when I'm the sheriff, I'm going to tell you what they are, whether you want to know what they are or not, because it's unacceptable. I have no problem with getting grant funds. I have a problem with misusing them, misdirecting them, and not having a mission.
Good afternoon. My name is Elsie Ramirez, and I have 2 questions that are going to be all together in one question. Pardon me if you've already answered it, then I'll understand. On your first day in office, what will be your priority to your staff and citizens of Dona Ana County, and how do you feel about bullying in the workplace, and what will you do about it?
Since yours is long, is it okay if you keep them or if you stay up there and just...
I think it'll take 4 days, and the reason being we have line level officers, we have sergeants, we have lieutenants, we have captains. Actually, we have 1 major. We're going to sit down with those individuals alone, and we're going to tell them a couple of things. 1, policies and procedures are going to be updated immediately as soon as we can do them. They have not been updated since 2005. I'm not even sure that we meet the state standard in certain of those areas. Think about lawsuits, just saying. Second of all, we're going to tell them that the days of yesterday are gone. You can be my friend, you can be my brother, father, sister, mother. You do something wrong, it's investigated, you're found to have done it wrong, you violated policy, procedures, and state laws, there will be swift consequences. I am a person who has been the victim of abuse of policies and procedures. They were used on me. And while I prevailed, not everybody in that position over the years has. Not everybody was able to launch that fight. We cannot show favorites. We can no longer be cronies. We can no longer have nepotism and fraternization rule the day. Someone asks me all the time, how do we prevent or lessen lawsuits? Start there.
Do you want to repeat it?
Yes, please.
On your first day in office, what will be your priority to your staff and citizens of Dona Ana County, and how do you feel about bullying in the workplace, and what will you do about it?
Thank you.
My goal upon returning to the sheriff's office is to get with the employees in the sheriff's office, myself, my hired secretary, and my undersheriff, and to discuss any of the issues and concerns that they may have at any level, openly and transparently discuss problems from the past, current issues, and everything else, and then to give them a clear direction that we're going to head. And no, ma'am, I do not agree with bullying. It is wrong. It is not allowed. It is zero tolerance in the county, and I believe that we take care of that whenever it arises.
Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Linda Harris, and my question is in regards to community policing. And they say that if you can look a policeman in the eye and see a person versus a badge versus fear, then you've seen the true humanity of the person. But how do you do community policing specifically when you can also not be afraid of the policeman, but at the same time be assured of that the authority that you will be protected? And how is that taught in the training for your policemen, that fine balance?
Yes, ma'am. Ms. Harris, that's a very good question. I said many times when I was a sheriff before that if I had 160 deputies that thought just like I did, we wouldn't have very many problems. The hard part is to get your desires and thoughts and feelings down to that level, and then to try to get them to portray that out on the street. That's one of the things that we're going to work very hard at. And I believe having deputies at the community meetings and getting them to join in those kinds of things is very important in order to establish that kind of relationship. I think in the past what we've done is we may have one officer or one supervisor come out and he addresses, and when the community is frustrated because something hasn't been dealt with, they holler and scream at him, and in turn he feels like he's having to defend his actions and what he's doing. So I'm hoping to get in there and to talk to the deputies about that kind of stuff, that we have to not only just listen to what's being said, but we have to hear what people are saying and their concerns, and we have to deal with those issues. I know it's a problem because I've been married for 36 years and my wife and I still have that same thing going on today. It happened yesterday. She said something to me and I felt attacked, and I immediately jumped into defense mode and I realized that that's something we do. It's very easy to do, and I'm going to work very hard to make sure that our deputies on the street level get in, and I know it can work because I've seen it work. When you get buy-in from them, they are going to be willing to go out there, and when they get to where they know the people and the people know them, that confidence is going to return, that respect is going to return, that acceptance is going to return, and we're going to make a difference.
I think your question is so important because before we can truly reveal who we are and talk about facts, we must have some empathy. We must learn how to empathize with individual problems. I heard someone say the other day that I'll have a discussion with you, but we're going to talk about facts. Well, facts often don't dictate our communications, do they? And one thing about today's youth, they don't communicate as some of us did in the past. They're doing it technologically. I think that I was talking to the psychologist who does our processing of recruits, and he and I talked about opening communication. How do we facilitate that? And very few of us have been victims, to be honest with you, very few. And I think if you have been a victim and you hear someone reporting to you and very upset, you didn't do this and you didn't listen, that's easier sometimes for a person who's been through it to understand it. I have let them, because I've been a victim, I've been a witness. My partner accidentally shot himself when we were in a rural area, and it was the worst 30 minutes of my life. I've never helped someone and sobbed during the whole thing. And so when people have come to me years later and said, my boy, he's been shot down here, well, she's not interested in facts. She's interested in making a human connection. And I think that's important. We can't always just start with facts. We have to start with that human connection and reveal who we are as well, and be unafraid to do that. And that's something in my own profession. I've seen us have a lot of fear around that because we look weak. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both.
My name is Paul Jaramillo, here in Las Cruces. I wanted to ask you, when you get into office, what could you do to make sure that officers are more better trained when it comes to mental illness? Because I know my friend that she lost her son a couple weeks ago, and so what would be the best way to go forward? And because people with mental illness they're suffering very, very greatly, and they just need help. So what can you do in future training when it comes to mental illness?
Thank you, sir. I think we did address a little of that often the people we meet in line law enforcement are in fact either self-diagnosed, self-medicating, or they're actually diagnosed with mental illness. And as I said earlier, we do what's minimum. We meet the standard per state requirement in terms of understanding mental illness and understanding the approach. This sounds crazy, but I've been an officer about 14, 15 years before someone told me, people who suffer from schizophrenia, they're afraid of people in uniform. Nobody ever told me that before, and here I've been approaching people in uniform, right? And they made the remark, if you just put on a jacket when you walk up to them, that will do a lot to diminish that contact and that tension. So I'm not saying those are the answers, but I am saying that it's a complex problem, and meeting the minimum standards is not where we need to be in 2018.
I agree, this is a great question, and it's one that we're going to deal with. I don't think anybody fully understands until you've been in that situation. When you know that you are dealing with someone who has mental health issues and they've lost it that day, and they're doing something against the family, and the family loves them. When the officers respond, oftentimes we're met, and we have to meet what we come into with the proper, when a person's trying to kill you, you have to defend yourself and those that are around. It's not something that I can tell you, having known officers that have shot someone, being one that's almost had to shoot people myself, it is a very difficult thing to do, but it is what we are paid to do and to take care of. I agree, we have to work and do something in the training and in our communities, because when the HIPAA rules protect everybody from disclosing any kind of those issues, an officer has to respond to whatever he comes to whenever he gets there. And oftentimes, these people with mental health issues and concerns are coming outside with the pure and simple fact that they're going to make you shoot them because they don't want to do it themselves. And that's something that we deal with on a daily basis. And when I, the other day, was speaking about facts, that's something that I was talking about. We have to deal with those facts. It's hard for me to debate an emotion that's going on. I know mental health is that issue, that's that concern. We need to sit down at a table and we need to work with the people that are involved in those fields and try to figure out a better way to respond. But law enforcement still has to do our job. With 30 years law enforcement in this county, I know what we have to do. And to say that the officers don't care is wrong. I can tell you they go home at night and they cry and they are sobbing, and it's hard to deal with life after you have to be involved in a situation like that. But that's who responds when you're called. So we will definitely work on that issue in great detail.
Good afternoon, candidates. You're holding up pretty well. And I'm impressed with both of you. I'm David William Buckland. I am a new resident of Las Cruces and the state. And I've learned a lot today. I've been trying very hard to formulate my question to the parameters given. So, you can respond to the positive or the negative. I would like to know what the advantages or disadvantages are of being elected into office and being a certified public servant, or being a non-certified public servant who's, in my very limited knowledge, apparently somewhat dependent on an unelected person to administer their office. I may not be understanding that correctly. So take whichever approach you want, but I'd like to get more educated about this.
Our state constitution says that a person who wants to run for sheriff has to be 18 years of age and not convicted of a felony. So that opens the door for anybody to run. It's up to the voters to compile the information they hear, and that's why we have a vote. That's why we vote on that type of thing. If the voters feel comfortable with somebody, then that's by all means, I believe that's who they should vote for. That's why I love this office. We are elected by the people to do the job of law enforcement. That's what we would oversee. I believe as a sheriff, having a career in law enforcement and being certified helps to relate better with your deputies and to relate better with the law enforcement side of things. And as the sheriff, you are the administrator of that office, period. You are responsible for every decision that's made in that place. You're held accountable for every decision an officer makes in that place, and it comes back to you. And you have to answer for it. So I believe that that's my opinion, that being certified and having a law enforcement background in this community and in this state would definitely help and make an officer more in tune to what is going on out of the street.
I too am confused at times by New Mexico law. Okay, as I understand it, if you've been out 3 years out of law enforcement, and I've been retired longer than that, I could go through a training up in Santa Fe and become commissioned again as an officer, okay? The sheriff, as he had indicated, has limited, very wide parameters of who you can be in your experience, right? The current sheriff is not certified to go out and write tickets or arrest. That would be my role. I would be an administrator. I would handle the budget. I would set the course of the department, but I would not be essentially capable, commission-wise, of enforcing the law. Now, that said, there is a, I believe, 2-week course that I can go as an elected sheriff and learn about the laws of the state of New Mexico, which I will do, and I certainly need that. Laws pretty much across the country are pretty similar, but there are these differences that is valuable to know. In this state, the undersheriff is responsible for operations. So that person does day-to-day management, if you will. The sheriff sets the direction, sets the tone, is the final say. That's why it was important to me to get a currently working, fully commissioned officer to come on board, Sergeant Quesada.
Thank you.
I too am a fairly new citizen of Las Cruces in New Mexico. I've only lived here 3 years, and I try to be an educated voter. So as elections come up, I spend a lot of time doing research on the candidates to see who I'm interested in supporting. Because I rarely vote party lines, I tend to try to select the person who's most qualified. Novel idea, but I try to do that. Of course, you know, you start with a Google search. This day and age, with technology we have, we're able to actually find out a fair amount there without having to do a whole lot of digging. And I've got backgrounds on both of you. I just had a question for Mr. Garrison.
The questions are supposed to be for both.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
I'll ask the question and both can answer however they feel then. My question is, when I see Mr. Garrison's name show up on a number of sites out there that are at best anti-government, at worst.
Oh, it's that microphone. If you could hold it, please, or the mic. Yeah.
At worst, they support domestic terrorism. Your name is showing up out there on a lot of those sites, or a number of those sites, at least 5 that I know of. And I'm concerned because it doesn't appear that you're a member of those organizations, but they're holding you up as a bit of a poster boy as a sheriff for some of your views, I guess, while you were in office. And I'm just wondering, do you actually support that sort of stuff? And if not, why have you not removed your names from those sites?
Well, okay, so I'm going to try to rephrase this question. Yes, because it's very specific. So there's ways to rephrase it, or you can maybe ask him privately. It's just that we're trying not to make any targeted questions or questions specific to one candidate. You might be able to rephrase it by some of the other associations they may have,
Let me just go to another question.
Okay.
There's been, obviously the Organ Mountains have been designated as a national area, and I'm just wondering how you both feel about that, since I've seen in my research some lack of support for that, indicating that it could be a pathway for undocumented folks doing illegal things. So I'm just wondering, now that it's been several years since that's happened, how you both feel about that.
That, I believe, is the reference to the Organ Mountain Wilderness, the 500,000 acres that was committed to that by the then Sheriff Obama. I mean, President Obama. He could be a sheriff if he wanted to be. Anyway, at that time, there was a lot of fear mongering that went on. To be honest with you, I was around for part of that discussion, and it had to do with it would be a pathway for criminals and bandits and drugs, and we would not be able to provide service as a sheriff's department if it were made a wilderness. I see no evidence of that having occurred. Now that said, we do not get annual reports on statistics from the Sheriff's Department, so perhaps there was an inordinate rise in robberies and problems out in that 500,000 acres. I have not heard of it. Also be aware, there are BLM police. There is enforcement in those areas. It was not just up to the Sheriff's Department to provide that level of service if there were needs. Also, the sheriffs are not prohibited from going into those wilderness areas when called and when there are emergencies and so forth. So if you're asking, I think a lot of the hype, if you will, I think it was a scare tactic, quite frankly. I think it did not pan out. I don't see big headlines in the newspaper about big issues out in that 500,000 acres. And I would venture to say I've enjoyed that wilderness area. And my opponent probably has too, unassailed and unharmed.
First of all, let me address your first question. I don't know what groups I'm listed on or anything else. If it has anything to do with the U.S. Constitution, Second Amendment, I'm your huckleberry. And if I'm the NRA or something like that, I am a member. So I don't know what groups you have found or what I'm located on. I have no idea. I did support those things when I was sheriff, and I will continue to support them now. The wilderness is a great issue, and I love talking about that. I feel that this community was snowballed by the senators that introduced that. I have no problem in protecting this area, and the stuff I brought up was factual. The things I brought forward were factual. The sheriffs on the entire border fought that. It wasn't just me. The Western State sheriffs came forward and they fought that issue because we have seen the monuments brought in and the wilderness areas brought into Arizona, where it's so close to the border, and what has happened and what has occurred in those areas, because in doing that, it has kept law enforcement out. Miss Stewart is very correct, and she doesn't know what happens out there. I do. 1 month when I was sheriff, we had 13 recovered stolen vehicles in that same area. Vehicles stolen in Arizona, brought to the border, loaded with drugs, and driven across that area, taken to Hatch, through the desert, over the mountains, and everything else. One being a Toyota Corolla. Toyota Corolla punctured the oil pan and leaked oil all over the place. and then got the load up over the mountain, and then the drugs were carried on through. There is criminal activity that happens out here. We recover bodies from people who are crossing our borders and left to die by the people that are bringing them across. We've had children raped and left out there to die. We have recovered, we have done all kinds of things like that. And my concern in the status that they were trying to put those lands into, it would keep law enforcement out, and I was opposed to that. I was never opposed to taking care of those lands, and you're correct. I have spent many, many hours out there on those lands hunting, not fishing, but hunting and growing up. So, and I love that area. It's a beautiful area.
So a brief follow-up for you. So based on your statement, can you clarify whether the status that it currently is under, whether that prevents law enforcement from being in that area?
I don't know how it was ever completely defined. It was finished after I was gone. Our concern was that if they did that, which it didn't meet the restrictions of what they were trying to do with it at the time. I think the Oregon Mountains were more selected for what they were trying to do. But your question was?
Based on your statement, if you are saying that law enforcement is currently unable to be present in the monument.
Well, I don't, like I said, I don't know how it was finalized and finished, but access was what I was concerned about. We have roadways out there, and I know that their plan was to get rid of the roadways that went through the monument and to have stem roads out there that went short distances. That's not where we need to get. We needed to get further into the heart of things, and that's where we would go with the equipment that we had, the resources that were provided by Stone Garden to use for body recovery and to do criminal investigations on crime scenes out there.
Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon, candidates. My name is Lynn Moorer. Thank you both for being here. These forums are very important for the citizenry, and thank you for committing and being here to do it. I have a fairly sensitive question. I used to work as a reporter for one of the local newspapers, and I've done a lot of research talking to a lot of county employees. And I have heard from quite a number of employees in the Sheriff's Department that there is a very deep-seated mean-spiritedness and nastiness that goes far beyond bullying. I'm sure bullying is a part of it, but there is a very, very negative culture among many of the officers. And this has great influence on how basically everything works, on how people get along with each other. I'm sure it has a certain amount of influence upon how officers get along with members of the community as they follow up. It has to do with the mindset. It's been very disturbing what I have heard from quite a few employees. What are you willing to do, if anything, to take steps to investigate this? To see if you do find this to be the case, and if so, then what kind of a plan, how fast do you think you could formulate a plan to address this?
I believe that is wrong. One of the persons asked a while ago about bullying. Bullying is zero tolerance in the Sheriff's Office, and it will not be tolerated. Those things do happen. There are times that I have seen it happen, and we've dealt with those issues when I was sheriff before. I can say that myself and my secretary and my pick for undersheriff, Mr. Childress, who has also been a certified law enforcement officer in this county for over 30 years, and who worked for the sheriff's office in a capacity as a captain over the animal control unit. We have a lot of knowledge into the people and the problems that occur in those things, and when they're addressed and brought to our attention, we dealt with them swiftly and took care of them. And the plan would be to continue the same. I mean, to deal with our HR people and to deal with the county. I think the one thing that the people don't understand, and they believe that when the sheriff takes over the sheriff's office, that he has all the employees and everything. The employees go through the county government, and they are held by the county government. The sheriff cannot just come in and get rid of. You have to follow the county procedures and work with the HR department and the policies and procedures that you have in place. And Ms. Stewart said a while ago too that those policies and procedures had not been updated since 2005. I know when I was sheriff that I signed many new policies up till the time I left in 2014 as they were revised and best practices taken place.
Just a quick follow-up then. So your answer is essentially that you will listen to people who come to you to complain, but you're not planning to go take the initiative to try to ferret things out and find out if things exist that a normal, ordinary person may feel some intimidation to even talk about, to volunteer. Is that right?
No, ma'am. I believe that if a person has something and they say, I mean, that it would be addressed with the people as a whole, that would not be tolerated. But having to get that response from the employees is one of the things that you have to seek out and try to, have a working relationship with them where they feel comfortable to do that. And we're going to work very hard to make sure that relationship is in place. That is one of the first things I plan on doing, is spending a great deal of time with the sheriff's office and the officers in that department to rebuild that relationship with the sheriff and the administration, so that those things can be properly addressed.
One of the things that's been rampant in county government, as far as I've seen it, is retaliatory behavior. You can call it bullying, you can call it using the policies and procedures to take out your friends or your enemies of your friends. It can be a very sharp knife, and it cuts very deep into the morale of that entire county. I have not heard the specifics you have spoken of about the department, because of course I don't have those kinds of open lines of communications. However, what you're saying does not surprise me. Okay? And you, as the leader, regardless of whose employees they are, they may be the county's employees, the county's asset, the county's human resource, but you are the leader. You are the person where the buck should stop on things like that. And I think respect begins at home. I don't think those deputies have had the respect over the years and the good treatment they deserve. I can tell you in the county they haven't. The ones I know about, treated very badly. So it doesn't surprise me that at that end of the building there should be that problem as well.
Can I just clarify that it goes far beyond just a matter of low pay?
Oh,
you see, it's
agreed.
not just morale because of low pay. There's a lot of other things that factor in.
Yes, it's retaliation. And when you abdicate your role as the leader or the manager or the supervisor and you leave that to someone else, what happens? Power vacuums occur, right? And then we have everybody striving to have their own feudal kingdom within the big kingdom. You see, all of that plays layer after layer to get where we are today. So respect begins at home, and equal treatment. I cannot stress enough to you that equity is what most employees anywhere want. First, last, and always is equal treatment. So I leave you with that. I leave you with the fact that I've seen it up close, and it does occur, and I really hope it's not to the extent you mentioned.
Thank you. I look forward to both of you looking into it, depending on who's elected, taking the initiative to look into it, not just passing it to somebody else. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Rusty Pierce, and the question I have for you is, I think you both have answered it here just recently, but I'd like to give you a chance to elaborate. Who is going to be your undersheriff, and what qualities and characteristics made you choose that person, him or her, as your undersheriff?
I hesitated not one moment to choose Jaime Quesada. It wasn't because I'd known Jaime for 10 years, but because I've known his work ethic, I've known his family, and I'll tell you something that was really important to me: honesty and trustworthy. If you have those qualities going forth, not to mention an extensive background in law enforcement, working internally and with federal agencies, networking, and so on, task force, those are vital. But if you don't have an honest, trustworthy person to be that operational head, it's really hard then to turn around to people, isn't it, and say, do what I say and not what I do. So for me, there was no question. Mr. Casada, Sergeant Casada, he's the man for this job. He's right for the time, he's right for the role, and we share that common perspective and belief that we need to have a new path.
Great. My pick for undersheriff would be Curtis Childress. Curtis Childress has retired with the city PD after 22 years, I believe, or whatever the number was. He then came out of retirement and went to work for the sheriff's office and took the then animal control group, and we tackled the new laws that had been passed by the governor at the time over animal abuse and animal problems that we were dealing with, and then the animal issues and concerns that we've dealt with in this county for a long time. He received national recognition for the work that he did, and I know that Curtis has been a friend of mine and a person that I trust very closely. I know that he is a good administrator. He understands the importance of best practices and policies and procedures and how to make those things happen, how to get those things done. And I know that his law enforcement experience has been stellar in this community, and I look forward to working further with him as the undersheriff of Dona Ana County. He is respected by very many people there, and those that don't know him well enough yet, and they will soon grow to respect him too.
Thank you, and a follow-up for both of you on that question. If a record were presented in front of you with both of your undersheriffs right now, would you sign off on it, or would you have hesitations on signing on to anything that he or she, or he in both cases, had done? Is there anything that would give you reservation to sign on your undersheriff? Is there any reason that you would have hesitation to make him your undersheriff, and to both of you?
Could you restate that? I'm not sure what you're saying.
Sure. Is there anything that would give you hesitation to appoint Mr. Childress your undersheriff, or in this case, Mr. Casada?
None. No.
Thank you.
No, as I say, I've known his past, I've known his background. He's well respected by people that do this job in the community. I am confident that he will continue to be a stellar example of law enforcement going forward.
Okay, and our last question. Sorry, got all tangled.
Good afternoon, and thank you both for your honesty this afternoon. Having just brought up your picks for undersheriff, I'd like this question answered regarding not only yourselves, but your picks for undersheriff. What is your experience for you or your pick, if any, with discrimination? Have either of you ever been, have you ever committed, been accused of being committed, been victims? And if so, can you elaborate and let us know how it was handled?
I have been over the years victim of discrimination in several areas, but you have to also remember the time. I was the only woman hired by 2 agencies. I was one of the first women in the state of California to go on patrol. So it is a different time now, and I want to just give that caveat. Second of all, as internal affairs for the county for 2 years, I investigated discrimination complaints, and I investigated actually a wide variety of malfeasance, employee malfeasance. So I, as a person who's had that experience herself, I would say I'm very familiar with the law of how EEO and discrimination law works. And then on top of it, I was trained by EEO to do those investigations. So I have, I think, a pretty wide perspective about how to handle those issues and the devastating effect they have on a department and on a county. They're devastating. As internal affairs for the county, I told the then county manager and the assistant county manager when their remark to me was, let them sue. Let them sue. That's abdication of management. That's abdication of leadership. You don't say, let them sue. You say, you know what? There's some issues here. There's some real things. We could get involved at a much sooner, earlier level rather than going to lawsuit, right? There's a whole gamut. We can go from 0 to 60 overnight, but we don't need to. So I think I may have strayed a bit on your question, but the point is, I've lived it, I've been involved in it, I've been retaliated against for being a whistleblower, I've been on both sides of that coin. And I think it speaks a little bit to what you said. I do have a little bit of empathy. It doesn't mean I don't know how to investigate. It doesn't mean I'm not honest. It doesn't mean I put words in people's mouths in my investigations. That was never my job to do any of that. I didn't do findings, right? So, unfortunately, when you've lived it, you do have a very strong opinion of how devastating it is to an agency or a county. And I look forward to a day when that is behind us.
Can I ask a follow-up?
For her?
Yeah, can I ask a follow-up?
Okay.